Hey, hello, how are you? This is a show for everyone else. Instead of going after top 1% of the world, we dedicate this podcast to celebrate the lives of the unsung heroes and self-made artists. Hi there, it is your host, Fei Wu, and you're listening to part 2 of the episode with Margo Aaron. So let's talk about the space for a second. You live in Manhattan. It's, as we all know, it's a very expensive spot, even for outer skirt of New York in general. So how big is this space? I mean, how did you find the space?
It's not a physical space. It's virtual. So that's what's so amazing. Right. So that's the point, is that I have joined so many physical co-working spaces, and you don't have that sense of camaraderie or community.
I love it. You kept saying it, but somehow in my, it's so, and then I think altMBA is very much online.
Very similar. altMBA would be great. And we have a lot of altMBA people in there. But it wasn't specific enough. I felt like even in the altMBA, I was meeting people and I was like, you don't have a business. You're just awesome. But I want to talk to someone who has a business. And, so I wanted to connect people, but the actual space, I would love to do more in-person events. Like this is a promise I have to the community. And that's part of why I want to expand, is you can't do that unless you have a critical mass of people in one specific area. And the people I really want to reach are the ones that aren't in Manhattan. I think it's really easy to connect here. But I'm originally from Texas, and it's hard to find people in Houston. It's hard to find people in Kansas. It's hard to find people in Montana, or like places that don't necessarily have a startup culture, altMBA culture, have a growth mindset type of people. It's hard to find that. So I have managed to attract them through my website, that seems important. And I know that they're all looking for each other. So like my goal is just to connect them.
Amazing.
And if a little bit with marketing, great, I will. But I think the connections, Faye, like they expand business. They really do. Aside from anything that I do, like people are building partnerships, people are expanding their followings. We have one person who went from 10,000 to 60,000 followers on Instagram just by playing around. So she did a members only workshop for us on like what she did. And now she's helping other members. It's stuff like that like you that outside. I never got that from a WeWork. It was always like some formalized thing, and
I know what that is.
Their system, and you're not getting real value.
Yeah, I know. The WeWork in Boston, I mean, one of my clients is there, and I don't even see people talk to each other. It's the same little corner, people eating lunch on their own. But I love the physical space of it. That is so beautifully said. So, I have some questions related to the events, which you already talked about at a high level. Like experts will come in. And so what is that general format like month to month? So like how many times a week, and what are there the topics predetermined, or impromptu, or people just have their camera on, like working, but no others are there? I
tried that. No one used it. Because like 2 people were like, oh, I thought that's what it was. And I was like, oh, okay. If you want that, we can have a constant Zoom space. No one used it because it's creepy. So it's a really good question. So there's only about 2 things I have set in stone, and then everything else is self-organized. So I always tell people when I interview them, like, this space is what you make of it. So some people have actually never used the Slack channel, which is insane to me because I don't know why you'd pay for something and not use it, but they get lots of value because I do, I didn't mention this, I facilitate introductions. So I'll one-on-one introduce you via email, so you're not coming in cold. And I'll match make you based on what you've told me some of your business issues are, or things you want to know. So if you're like, I'm a developer and I really want to meet designers, like I'll work with that. Or I'm building a team for the first time and I don't know how to do it. I'll focus on those things. Or if you're, all from Colorado, like I'll be like,
wow.
So that's one piece that they get out of it. But everything else is, so I have the expert interviews. That is not set in stone. It's really based on it's set in stone in terms of every month that's guaranteed. but it's not set in stone in terms of topic because I have to schedule it and you never really know. So, and I'm trying to react more to the community. So there are things that I think they want to know, and then I find out they want something else. So I'm trying to work kind of fluidly with what people are asking for. So we've had, just to give you an idea, we had a guy named Jan Roos, who is a PPC expert. He runs expertengines.co. We had the CEO of Bradford Crabtree, which is an SEO company, come in and give us the greatest chat on SEO. I ended up turning it into an Inc. article. It was so good.
Oh, wow.
And we also had Sarah Jones, who runs introvertedalpha.com. She did an AMA with us. So we didn't have her do a workshop. We just had her talk about how the frick she does this. She runs a coaching company for introverted men, who want to find romance. It's just so interesting. It's there's no way that's a real business. And then this month we're going to have Eric Johnson, who's a friend of mine that works at the behavioral insights team at Morningstar. So he's going to talk about growth hacking and marketing and behavioral economics. So yeah, those are set in stone and they're recorded for members only. So if you can't make it, it's fine. But the value I think comes out of being able to ask questions.
Wow. Could some of those be, so this is why members only makes the space very special and people want more likely to want to opt in. What are the likelihood of some of those videos be converted into webinars so that you charge and they'll maybe open to the general public? Is that even?
I don't want to.
Yeah. I was hoping that you would say that.
I know I should. I know those convert really well. I want the space to be protected. I want it to be where you can talk about specifics of your business that you wouldn't be comfortable with in public. And I tell that to my guests too. If they want to repurpose any of the content, I tell them no. So there's occasionally I'll say you can use a clip of just yourself, but if there are my people in it, absolutely not.
Yeah, you do. I mean, that in general, you do need people's permission on doing. Yeah.
And I want it to feel safe. For sure.
That is so fascinating. I mean, so I was very eye-opening. I mean, I just feel like this conversation is so helpful. In a way, it's more helpful. I can see why people want to talk to you one-on-one, or you meaning anybody of those experts within the group. Because we really need this intimate conversation, this trust. This can happen without the recorder turned on too. And we don't have that anymore. I feel like the society at large is craving for this. And through this conversation, it gave me so many ideas because so many people text me and email me, not every day, but these days, weekly, to say, how do you do what you do? Can I ask you a question? I'm really embarrassed to even post it anywhere on LinkedIn. So some are related to podcasting. A lot of them are related to freelancing. And I felt like, why don't I create in the back end, it's so much work to connect people, all the time. And I become the bottleneck, right? If I don't do my work, they will never talk to each other. They will never know each other. But this is so fascinating. I mean, I feel like I can't find the right word right now, but the frequency of what we're talking about, what we're trying to do, even though differently, but there's so many similarities. It's like this decision that we have to make on a daily basis of what we share and how do we balance client work versus, our own work. So it's, on one hand, it's really compelling, with my hourly rate is fairly reasonable. It's not low. So to me, it's rather profitable. Every hour I work, I get paid. But I started to think, this whole hours for dollars sort of model that's no longer compelling. Right? I notice my day with multiple clients are every half an hour I have a meeting, and I can't really do much within those 15 minutes if I'm lucky, if the stand-up actually ends in 15 minutes. So this whole model shift, and I feel like you're really very much advanced compared to where I am currently. And just out of an altMBA assignment, you turn this into a real thing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And let me just empathize with you for a second, because I so get where you are at. Like I had to say no to a lot of money to get here. So I don't want to pretend like this is a walk in the park. I'm lucky. I don't have kids yet. Like I was fine to be able to do that. And I saved a lot of runway, but, changing your business model. The first shift I made when I was where you are is I just did project fees across the board. I did that about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And that changed a lot for me because one, I hated being tracked on time. And it incentivized me to be inefficient. And I hated that piece. And sometimes I'm trained as a strategist. So sometimes I would spend like an entire day on research, and I don't want clients to know that. Like, I don't want them to be billed for the fact that I read slowly and in depth, right? Like that bothered me. So just putting that in made me feel better and buffering it. And then the other piece is client management is such a full-time job that it was almost more expensive with my time than the actual deliverables. So project fees really helped. But what I didn't do, that if you can do this, then you will build the business I couldn't do, systematizing my service offerings. So having like specific packages. What I did was I would tailor what I offered to each client, which landed me a lot of really big proposals, but it wasn't repeatable. And it destroyed, I think, our ability to scale. It wasn't smart because people would come to me, they're like, "Can you do this?" And I'm like, "I've never done that before, but we'll figure it out." Mm-hmm. And that, like, it's a cool like bootstrap approach, but it's not actually a good way to run a business. Mm-hmm. You have to know what to say no to. So learning how to say no to those projects really helped. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I hear you. It's frustrating.
I think this is not to add more work to you. A lot of what you just talked about, the mistakes you made from building an agency on your own to now, the things what to say no to. I mean, these are such great articles. Maybe you've written them already. And I haven't gotten to them. But there's another part that I was going to ask is the list of software, right? Because mm-hmm. virtual working space is quite popular. And we've witnessed that firsthand through altMBA. And then even they were so honest about, look, we're still trying to figure this out. And there were complaints about how WordPress wasn't running efficiently, was confusing, or and then Slack. So what are you don't have to memorize all of them, but what are some of the, starter pack looks like for you to
oh my God, spin up? I actually have this on my to-do list to go through. So this will be helpful.
Gotcha.
For sure, WordPress, I use WordPress, so hosting. I'm not a designer, so I actually have a friend who did some back-end development for me and ended up doing some design based on wireframes I put together. So like I bootstrapped that, but that would have cost a ton of money. And everyone who tells you, you can do a drag and drop builder, I couldn't. Like, I'm a writer. I don't have good eyes. So like I taught myself WordPress and design. So Faye, you'll laugh. But I was like in tears trying to figure out how to work Divi Builder, which was like the easiest one. I just couldn't do it.
Divi can get pretty evil though. Sorry, it's true.
Thank you.
Yeah, trying to simplify and actually make things more complicated. Right? Yeah, so it's much better than not having it. I appreciate it in some aspects, but it's not a beginner's first rodeo.
Yeah, now I feel better about my skills. But that was one of those things where I was like, you either like, this is an inefficient use of my time. I need to outsource this. So that's one. Then you have payment processing. So I think we use WooCommerce and Stripe. Mm-hmm. ConvertKit. I switched from MailChimp to ConvertKit. So that cost me maybe $30 a month.
Why is that? Why did you switch?
That's a great question. A few reasons. Email is my primary channel. So for me, that's the most important part of my business, more than my website, more than like any other thing I do. So I wanted a software that, what was MailChimp doing? It was, there's something called content upgrades where at the end of a blog post, you have like a call to action that says, for more on this, sign up for this. And you'll probably see it if you guys look at my website. But I couldn't do more sophisticated opt-ins with MailChimp, and it wasn't integrating well with WordPress, like not in any way that was beautiful. Or even little things like on Twitter, I wanted a link in my bio that went directly to a landing page, and MailChimp's just looked weird.
Oh, well, MailChimp's landing pages couldn't be more minimum, but Squarespace does come with some cover pages template, which you could.
Squarespace is great. And so I also pay for Squarespace because my old business was hosted on them. So I have like my old boutique firm is on there, and I haven't taken it down. So ConvertKit also, it's amazing for email marketing. So if you are a blogger or someone who does one-on-one emails, not newsletters. If you're doing broadcast stuff, don't do them. They have basically no graphics. But for someone like me who's a writer who wants long-form emails to feel really intimate, the deliverability is better, the interface is amazing. They also don't double count your subscribers. So in MailChimp, you have lists. And if you have the same person on multiple lists, you're double charged for that. ConvertKit doesn't do that. You just have like one giant list and they're tagged differently. So the backend's really friendly, and their help is amazing. Their help is amazing. Like they're built specifically for people with businesses like you and I. I think that's part of it too.
I was on the fence. I just downloaded their trial version. I wasn't sure I was going to do it because I also started with MailChimp and I finally hooked everything up. But, in the long run, I think would be more helpful. I mean, that list really goes on, right? And there's also lead pages. There's
I have Zoom. I have like those are like 500 something. Like it ends up being
it adds up quickly. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and especially if you're starting out. But obviously, with your rate of enough people, 20 people, that's already pretty substantial, right? And if you can make that into 100 people, then that's your easy 6-figure business already. So, that wouldn't be a problem. So you got ConvertKit. You're using You're using lead pages.
Lead pages. I love lead pages. They're worth every friggin' penny.
Oh wow.
I love them. I'm not a designer, so they have like a lot of really great built-in tools. But as someone who's a direct response marketer and copywriter, their stuff is using the best research. So one of the things I find that's a big divide in my space, at least, I think in your space, I think we're in the same space. But
yeah, we are.
Is that there's a lot of confusion between what's pretty and what works. And that was kind of my biggest point of contention with clients is they'd be like, that isn't pretty. And I'm like, but it converts. Like you just have to know. And if you haven't been schooled with the right eyes to understand, it's effectively UX. And you don't know what that looks like. And Lead Pages has templates that are beautiful, but they're also maximized and optimized for conversion. So you can get an idea of how things work instead of, I've seen some really beautiful splash pages, but like they are confusing. You can't see the call to actions, yeah.
So for example, my follow-up question is based on, ConvertKit does come with some of the landing pages, as you know. So does.
Yes.
Right. So
I bought Lead Pages first.
What is it?
That's the honest answer. I bought Lead Pages first and then switched to ConvertKit, and it was already paid for. So now I have both. But yeah, technically I wouldn't have needed both.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, it depends. You might still need Lead Pages, I think, when you get to a place I don't mean the Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss of the world, but when you have like courses, countdowns, you know what I mean? Like when it gets complicated, I really started, this was the question I asked myself for like 2 weeks already to say, when do I see myself jump to Lead Pages and Insta Pages? I bought Insta Pages last year. I built one landing page and didn't use it. It's like, why did I even pay for the annual fee? They totally got me.
What you mean? Yes.
They got me with their conversion UX tactics, and I couldn't help it. But I think for, people who are listening, who are just starting out, start with the absolute minimum software, but you need to know what that is. It's actually a trickier question. It's actually easier to buy everything and think that you have it all and try to figure out versus knowing that what is the bare minimum looks like. What is your, capsule wardrobe? What is your capsule software list?
Capsule software. I love that.
Right? Actually, I've been like dying to write about that. And
me too. Oh my God. That's such a good reframe. It's so helpful.
Yeah.
And plus, I think there are some style bloggers who would like be all over that. But no, it's such a good point because self-awareness is a part of this that we often dismiss as like, woo-woo-y personal development, like who cares? But like, if you don't know yourself and what business you're actually creating, you have these ideas in your mind of what you absolutely must have, and it's not true. The one thing I was right about that other people weren't was AppSumo. So opt-ins are really important for me because everything I do is email. And so every developer I talk to, every designer was like, these are annoying. Like, can we please use something else? Do you hate this? And I'm like, nope.
It works.
Keeping them.
Yeah, I have SumoMe. That's like an incredible company, even though some people say it slows down your WordPress site, your website in general because of all the APIs and the JavaScript they're running on the back end. And I did email their support, and they say it's not true, and don't believe in those, low page load time. It's not true, but it's so smart. The stuff that they do in terms of when to, just before you're ready to leave the website, the pop-up comes up. I mean, this just sounds like super intelligent. So. That's basically my stack right there. Is currently MailChimp. I'm thinking about ConvertKit, especially after this conversation, a Squarespace, and then SumoMe. That's it. I feel like that is my capsule software. I absolutely want to continue this, but I also really want to talk about your writing. And
let's go.
Let's do this. So my first experience with your writing was, I don't even remember the assignment, but I think was about writing something about ourselves that others don't know. And I told my partner about this. I told at least 10 other people. But I remember the beginning of it, which was, my name is Margo. You know this because I just told you. But what you don't know is my aunt's name was Margo. And, and we lost her. And, you talked about your heritage, being Jewish. First of all, I couldn't stop reading, and it was so captivating. And there are many articles that I absolutely love, the people who wrote them, but, I really wouldn't mind going to grab, some croissant or some coffee or something to keep going. But, and I remember just midway through, you talk about the almost your lineage, and that is so precious, that you're named after your aunt, and the survival of your great-grandfather, your grandfather was a result of someone, and it was as a result of someone looking the other way, of someone of lending a helping hand. And that just, it's something so profound, about our life, about how anybody got to where they are. But in your case, it was a survivalship, right? So
I appreciate that. I remember that post, and that was a hard one for me to write, because you get a lot of scripts that go off in your head that say no one actually cares about this. And I have, one of the things I try and do is, what would I like to read? And 9 times out of 10, when I write something and I look at it, you have to, we were talking about self-awareness earlier. You have to be able to get out of your own head of like what you want to say and get into the mindset of like, is this actually fun to read? Because there's form and then there's content. And I think that we get really, really, like, people are good at content, right? We have lots of things to teach. We have lots of things to learn, lots of things to explain to other people. But how you explain those things is what really differentiates you. So where people tend to get stuck is they'll say, well, no one, the world doesn't need another marketing blog. Everyone knows, this about SEO, or everyone knows this about PPC. And they are right. They're right. Everyone does know those things, but they haven't heard them the way that you have to say them. And that's the thing that actually sets things apart. So my SEO piece is a good example of this. And I'll get back to storytelling in a second, where the reason that it's spreading the way it is not because there's anything in there you can't find elsewhere. All of it is regurgitated. There is no new information in this post. Zero. Okay. What makes it interesting is that I took the narrative from, here's what you need to know about SEO, to, okay, guys, I've been in business for 5 years and I, honest to God, have no idea how this works. So here's what I understand based on what he said. So it seems like you got this and you got that. And then within this, you got to do this, this, and this. Don't ask me why. You just got to do them. And like taking that tone of someone who is confused, who's honest, who is transparent, and who sounds like a human, you immediately can empathize with. Immediately. And that's what you want when you're reading something. You want to be able to empathize with the reader. It's not a textbook. If you're writing textbooks, that's different. And I would say you should still use more story. But in general, the reader doesn't want to be bored. The role is to pull them into the page, into the story. And so with the post that you're talking about, the approach I took was, it was very personal, but I wanted to highlight specific stories because we remember those. We just do. You remember stories more than facts, period. We're like story recognizing pattern machines. And I wanted a reframe because I think I look a certain way, I present myself a certain way, and I recognize that is confusing to people. For example, there are a lot of assumptions that I'm much younger than I am. There's a lot of assumptions that I haven't experienced hardships. There's a lot of assumptions that I'm very yuppie and preppy. And I know that these things exist about what I look like. So I like to reveal, once people have made those assumptions, that I'm actually only half American, that I actually am third generation Holocaust survivor, that I'm actually part of a minority, like that there are things that they can relate to me to.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautiful, To me, it's just a fascination of, right wherever we are, it's just a snapshot of, who we really are. But then we are creating history, and we're able to make a difference. And for people of the future generations to look back and, see how we transformed ourselves. And I see so much of that in your writing, because I don't want to make it sound so grand, but even at a very micro level of getting your posts and just have someone's day altered and to be able to think about other possibilities.
Thank you. Yeah. Listen, being third generation, it's part of what has driven me to the path I've taken, and part of why I feel so strongly that I want to make other people's lives better. Because the story you referenced earlier about my grandfather is that the reason he was able to cross the French-Italian border was because I can't remember which side. I think it was the French hated the Italians, and this guy just wanted to say "fuck you" and let him through. It was just like, they should have refugees. We don't want them. You go, piss them off. And it was that one time. I mean, in part it was kindness, and the other part was just some personal guy's vendetta. But that tiny action saved his life. And I think that you can do that in your business, no matter what it is. So for me, I have an audience, but if you have a client or whoever you have, you have personal agency. That's the biggest part of my message, is that you think you have no control, you have control. Most of life you don't have control over. Let's just start with that preface. But of the things that piss you off, you have more options than you think. Every border patrol guy could have said no to my grandfather, and this guy had an option to sneak someone through, and no one ever knew. But you have choices in your life, and I love your example of, is it not eating at your desk? The little things that you can do. Because more and more, I think that that's what holds us back in business, in marketing, in life. It is that feeling that everything isn't fixable or figure outable. And that's what I try and convey. If there's, and honesty. I think so much we have this facade that everything's perfect. And I've tried to even do this in this interview. I don't want everyone who listens to this to think Margo has it all together. I don't. Right? You have to recognize that at some point you have the same power as I do to step up and make something of your life and make something of yourself and do something that affects the lives of others, or whatever it is that's burning inside of you. And I want that to come through my writing, because there's a trickle down effect. If you feel confident in yourself after you read something of mine, you will send a cold email promoting yourself. You will find a way to touch someone else. That's the power in being able to figure out how to connect. But you have to find your voice. And that was actually what you bore witness to during altMBA. Being in the corporate world and working in marketing and as a copywriter for so long, writing other people's stuff, I lost my voice. I didn't know how I should talk. And instead I had data in my head where I was like, you should sound like this. And so says you should write this way. And so says this. And it took a really long time of consistent writing, year after year, to finally go, okay, no, this is how I want to do it. And this is why. And there's, we talk a lot about product market fit, and I don't think we talk enough about product founder fit, which is what works for you. I like the conversational style. I think The Atlantic will never publish me, and they would be right not to, because they don't fit there. I think the blogosphere and online articles work really well for my type of writing. I'm probably more of the Liz Gilbert type of writing, which, some people hate, and that's okay. And knowing that your voice is probably going to be hated by half of the people who read it is also something you have to recognize. And when you try and sound like what the data says you're supposed to sound like, or what you think you're supposed to sound like, you're never connecting. You're never, ever going to connect with the audience on the other side. You're never going to do it. You have to talk like a human. You have to write like a human. You have to connect like a human, but it has to be in your specific voice.
I must say that I really hope you consider starting a writer's workshop, like a writer's workspace, in addition to marketing. Potentially, I think, because writing is so necessary these days, most people can no longer write. And that's why when I started writing, I realized, okay, for 10 years, I wrote nothing but emails. And I was really saddened by that, because I always loved writing as a little kid, and I lost it all. So to get back into it wasn't easy, as you can imagine, but you also have this burst of energy and content. You don't know how to put it together, but it's all there. And so I think there's really an opportunity for you to not just run any writer's workshop. Like, we're just here to criticize you, to put you in a box, but no, like what you just did and what you said and what you're doing actively. If we have time to talk about your sort of writing routine, because you write a lot, you post regularly. I see, so, maybe a couple of times a week, at least once a week, based on what I've seen. How do you construct do you outline? Do you write? Do you go back the next day? I mean, when do you ship? How do you ship?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
So first off, large chunks of uninterrupted time are built into my schedule. So like tomorrow morning, my phone will be off, or I leave it in another room where I can't hear it. And I will not schedule any meetings. And for me, mornings are key. So having that time that you can just free write is key. Absolutely key. I couldn't do it without that. My articles that are good, I will distinguish this, they get edited over time. One of the ones I'm most proud of is called Honest Selling Secrets from a Dishonest Man. And it got... last I checked, it had gotten like 10,000 shares or something, which I know it was a lot for me. And it was my highest converting to my website, which was interesting. That took me 40 hours over several weeks. It was a lot of work. But that was an article that was a guest post for someone that I had given them the topic in advance, and I had some ideas. So that was one way. My weekly email is never done like that. That's a very different, it's much more altMBA of like, this needs to go out. And that's because the role of it is different. The role of it is one, exposure therapy for me to get used to emailing people and getting crickets and not sending something that sounds like a broadcast, and just practicing shipping on time and keeping a deadline. On a good week, I started on Monday. On a bad week, it's written that morning. And depending on whether or not my brain decides to come to work, it's good or bad, period. Mm-hmm. So that is not what I would advise for people. That ends up with a lot of embarrassment, but it does, what has happened as a result of writing with that frequency is you start to see patterns. So I start to see, no matter what, people pay attention to the message more than the form. I see, no matter what, someone's going to tell me I have a typo. I see, you start to have this resiliency that you see the patterns in how people respond, that it doesn't feel so friggin' personal every time you publish something. Because that's what used to happen, is that it would feel so personal that if you got one tiny criticism, even if it was warranted, you would be like, I can't publish anything anymore for the 2 months. And you're like back in your cave.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I mean, I really struggled big time. And as I've mentioned, I don't want to say, oh, Jewish people are great writers, but many, many of them are, and I'm surrounded by them.
Are you really?
That's so fun. Absolutely. I'm very lucky in that sense because English is not my first language. And, I didn't go to an international school when I was younger. My writing not only have typos I try to avoid, but there are also things, I guess, one, I may be saying something that I didn't quite mean that way, or the grammar is a little bit off. I'm fully aware. So for me, when I started the podcast, I have to talk like this in real time. And then writing, at least got a chance to correct myself. Yeah. Oh man, it's just like a stab in my heart whenever I hear feedback such as, oh, you that's not even what it meant. Or that, you kind of tense up and then you get this defensive mechanism. But now it's like, you know what? My readers got a lot out of this. I can correct it now. It wasn't the end of the world. And that took me, that feeling of to be, what's her name? Amanda Palmer. Like literally I can just be out there in the open and be naked. I'm going to be okay with it. It's such a powerful thing.
Yes. And I want to distinguish that between being fully yourself and being there and really caring about the quality of what you produce, even if it's bad, is so different from being lazy. And I think we confuse the two, because if you're being sloppy and you're just like, I'm just going to post this real quick, and there's an intentionality that goes into what you're talking about that's very different, that I respect. And I think every writer would respect, because that's how you get better. You have to keep producing. What you said about feeling self-conscious, there are several different types of writing on the internet. And the type you're talking about and being out there in the open is much more about blogging and emailing than about having long form articles that go in the Atlantic or Wall Street Journal or New Yorker. That's a very different type of writing. And I think you have to distinguish between them, because oftentimes what will keep us from doing it is we'll go, oh, well, this isn't good because it's not Atlantic quality. But it's not supposed to be. This is different. That's why copywriting is different. But letting yourself be okay with that and making mistakes is difficult. So you do have to focus on, was there still value in this piece, even if something was misunderstood? And I should state across the board, it is bad form, and this is my fault, to not have an editor. Like, I don't have an editor. I should have an editor, and it's something I'm working on, because those people can look at a good editor makes what you mean come alive, and they know what you mean, and they can put it in your language. That's not a ghostwriter. That's different. But I know the best writers I know actually work with amazing editors.
I also want to add that editors sometimes need not to be the spouse or the close family members and friends, even regardless how smart they are. And I think it's the degree of separation is necessary. But
I used to be really self-conscious when people would say, you're all over the place. I mean, they never said it to me, but they would say it to other people. And I would think, oh my God, is that what they're thinking about me? Because in a business, you're constantly pivoting, constantly. And it wasn't until I met other entrepreneurs who were in the same situation where they would be reacting to the market, because that's what you need to do. And if you don't have that validation of normalizing all these weird behaviors, and I imagine the same for project managers and the same for like every single field has this, it's enough to derail you. And I think sometimes that's more important than talent, to be able to know how to navigate those pieces.
Mm-hmm. For the last few minutes, are there something that you feel you want to talk about? It doesn't have to be any questions I necessarily ask.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to break the stereotype. I think if any of you are listening and you're putting pressure on yourself because your business doesn't look the way you think it's supposed to, or even if you're in a corporate job and you think you're supposed to be an entrepreneur, like, just don't judge yourself. Like, everyone who thinks that their life is supposed to be a certain way is going to end up being unhappy. You have to do what works for you. And I have met brilliant, brilliant people who are entrepreneurs. And I have met brilliant, brilliant people who are entrepreneurs. And I have met brilliant people who are thought leaders. And the more important thing is to know your strength and and fit that with the world that you build for yourself. So if you're not a writer and you're listening to this and you're feeling pressure to produce more, don't write. Like, get on Instagram and start playing with design or play with photography or play with audio. Like there are so many, or video, like there's so many different ways that you can connect with people that don't rely on what you think it's supposed to look like. So that would be the message I'd like to leave people with, of just stop judging the process and don't, everyone says, trust the system, do my hack, take my course, like make up your own rules. The best things happen when you're like, screw it, I want to do it this way. So do it this way. And guess what? Maybe you'll fuck up. You know what? Maybe it's totally wrong, but that's okay. And the process of fucking up and doing it wrong and rebuilding yourself is what's going to make you great. And that is the experience that people rob you of when they try and give you a course that teaches you everything perfect. There's no way to shortcut messing up. You have to mess up, and that is how you learn. So please, 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 if you take nothing else, don't judge yourself, mess up. And if your first version isn't something you're totally embarrassed by, you waited too long. I stole that. That was not original for me.
I love it. I'm so glad you're highlighting the courses, and just, I like when they say, learn from everyone, follow no one. It's okay to learn, right? If on one hand, and all those courses are incredibly expensive anyway, they charge thousands of dollars. And if you're going to just buy them and not watch them, don't do it. And there are a lot of free advice out there. So, no, not a single person is right. So, it's okay to read this and that, but I think some people just spend a lot of money just to prove as if they're, like we want to buy a few expensive things so we don't lose them and really treasure them. I get that idea, but if you don't really treasure that and it's just something you put on the shelf, then it's not worth it. Well, I love chatting with you, Margo, and hopefully I know this won't be the last time, but just want to close by thank you very much for sharing all your insights, and you just so transparent and honest, and it's so exciting. Makes me feel so excited to do what I do.
Good. You should be. You do such cool stuff. This was so much fun. It was really nice to virtually meet you.
I know. I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Feisworld podcast. My team and I will be thrilled if you choose to write us a review on iTunes. It really helps to get the word out. Simply search for Feisworld Podcast in your iTunes app under Podcast. Click on Readings and Reviews tab and then write a review. The star review takes seconds, or a brief text review will be fantastic too. Thank you on behalf of me and my team from Feisworld.
See.